Let's take a little trip and a little look at Otero County, New Mexico. It's in the southern part of the state, about 5 hours south of Albuquerque. Proud home of the world's largest pistachio. Wow. Which is some nice local trivia, but also brings us to a story that is nuts, with nutty election theories. In terms of voting, Otero County is a bright red dot in a blue state. So Biden won all of New Mexico, you see there, by double digits. But Trump carried Otero by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. Now, in New Mexico, the counties are responsible for administering their own elections. The county commission in charge has 3 members in Otero. All of them are Republican, including Couy Griffin. Now, before his tenure in election administration, he was a rodeo cowboy. And these days, he has tried to meld those passions for his politics and the cowboy thing in Cowboys for Trump. But it's gone beyond just politics and into, well, potentially supporting the storming of the Capitol, where he was on January 6th, and where he was charged with illegally entering the Capitol grounds, and where he was convicted in March of that charge. Today, Griffin was back in D.C. to get his sentence, and he was given 2 weeks of jail and a hefty fine. As a side note, you will see that that seems quite lenient when you think about how many people are serving longer jail sentences for what are considered more personal crimes, like, say, marijuana use or marijuana sales, as compared to storming the Capitol pursuant to a larger insurrection. But that's not even why we're getting into that case. What we're dealing with is the legal fallout, not only from participating in the insurrection and navigating jail time, but wielding power over other elections at the same time, which is, to use a legal term, pretty messed up. Because this county commissioner from Otero has cooked up a new scheme now, not history, now, trying to wreak havoc on free and fair elections in that little corner of the state where they have some nominal authority. The Trump cowboy there and 2 other Republicans on this Otero commission basically defied the normal and lawful certification of the results of a primary that was held last week. And then they did the usual thing. They didn't have evidence or something, because there might be times where you want to deal with, something relating to certification, but they just sort of said words about voting machines and that they wanted to get to the bottom of it, and thus they would not certify. Meantime, the commission's legally required, though, to certify the election, and the Supreme Court of the state has already now ordered them to fulfill their legal duties and certify the results by the deadline. So they're already losing in this particular instance. The Attorney General of the state threatening to also take separate legal action if they basically defy what is now that Supreme Court order of the state. The legal deadline is today. The Trump cowboy commissioner was in Washington for the criminal sentencing. They left his seat open, dialed him in on speakerphone so he could announce that he was willing to face potentially another and new criminal prosecution and vote against certifying these results. But when push came to shove, as the saying goes, the Trump cowboy was the only one willing to go out on that far of a limb. The other 2 Republicans, having tried this gambit with someone that we know backs aspects of the January 6th insurrection, the other 2 caved, because law matters, facts matter, and if courts actively oversee this and actively have prosecutors who are willing to create consequences, well, suddenly some of these people completely changed their tune. They voted to certify the results. But this is a little scary. And after another week of January 6 hearings, which are about January 6, 2021, it is vital to see how this stuff, in one sense, is being broken up, caught, and prosecuted. This is not a week to say nothing is working or happening. I just showed you some cases that are working. And we see sedition cases, and we see the Proud Boys busted and their organization busted up. But the threats to our democracy fomented by Trump are very much alive, and they are not fully addressed by even the incremental process that we've been reporting for you. And Trump wasn't the only one pushing the big lie. He had help, he had supporters, and he has people who are now in charge formally of administering our elections in certain places. Many of those people have those jobs. Some are competing for more power. And this is not about left and right. This is not about ideology. This is not about saying that only one party should be involved in overseeing elections. Indeed, as long as there are elections between parties, you would ideally want honest members of both who uphold their oaths to democracy and the Constitution to be involved. This is about radicalism, authoritarianism, and people who support dictators as long as they think it will benefit them. So it's a serious threat to the democracy. And that brings us back to a very conservative judge, Michael Luttig, who I should note is not cheered on everything by everyone. If you want a little political context, Ted Cruz said Luttig was like a father to him. Take that for what you will. And yet that is precisely why Luttig, as a Pence advisor, was on this issue, democracy or dictatorship, was that star witness at the January 6th hearing.
Donald Trump and his allies and supporters are a clear and present danger to American democracy. They would attempt to overturn that 2024 election in the same way that they attempted to overturn the 2020 election